Ladies and gentlemen, I believe we are live and we're back again today. It has been an exciting week and I think a very grounding week for a lot of us that grew up in Alameda on that island in the Bay, to revisit our roots and to celebrate the community we grew up with and the diversity that we grew up with. And it's been a great week, and it's also been a very tough week and trying week. But today I'd like to still go ahead and celebrate our youth and the success of the kids that I grew up with on the island. And today I'm joined by Tony Caligagan, who is really the host of Thrive. And we do health and wellness here. And he just happened to be my professor of dance my freshman year and so on at UC San Diego. And we do a lot of work together in the health and wellness space now. And also I've got Alexis Dixon joining us again with Mediation Solution International. And we're here today with the amazing Dr. Brabec, also known as Jenny Hall to most of us from our youth. And God, if there's one word that describes Jenny, it is just positivity, radiating, and the most beautiful smile. And I don't think I've ever heard a negative word out of Jenny ever.
Oh, you should come to work with me at night sometimes.
All right. Well, you saved it all up for, being a mother. Jenny, like she's an ER doctor, but before she even became an ER doctor, and we'll talk about it, like she went and learned how to fight forest fires and was fighting fires and still donate. Who's bombing in the back? One of your kids? That's a great segue. So she was a forest fighter, went to med school. She's an ER doctor. She's a world traveler. And she's also a mother of 3 boys. And just, we're going to talk about that, her journey from where I met her in high school, grammar school and high school, and then all the way up till now. And also what it means to be a doctor. I think it's really important. People talk about empathy now. We have at UC San Diego, we actually have with our friend Dr. Brenner at UC San Diego Health, there's a whole new program on compassion and empathy for medical students. So I think it's important that we also touch on mental health today and what you do to stay healthy and alert, pre-COVID. And then is there anything you're doing now with COVID, especially to just stay healthy, mind, body, and soul, so you can be there for the patient? And maybe we'll get to some of those crazy ER stories. Jenny visited us at Bella Vista one day, and we started out with the innocent ER stories, and then a few glasses of wine in, there were some crazy stories. All right, Jenny. So who wants to take the first question?
How are you doing? Tell us what's happening on the front lines these days, because we hear it from the news, but we don't hear it from doctors. So.
Yeah. So right now, Oregon, so we're a lot like California, where we had a governor that kind of saw the writing on the wall and just said, everybody go in your houses, like we're shutting it down. We're not waiting for the tidal wave to hit the shore, So for a couple of months, it was really stressful at work. More stressful than normal, because each day the protocol was different of what you did with this kind of patient or what you did with this complaint. Or even at the beginning, we didn't really even know how to treat COVID patients. We didn't know, is it better to put them on life support quickly, or is it better to kind of let it ride for a while and see how they do? And as time has gone on, we've learned it's better to let them ride and see how they do on their own, and only put them on mechanical ventilation at the very end, because 85% of those people die. And so that was a big learning curve, very stressful. It's also still really stressful about the PPE, because before, like, to give you an example, before COVID, I used probably 10 N95s my whole career for a decade, like one a year. And now if I could use them the way we're supposed to use them, I should probably use 5 a shift. And so and that you could probably, you can just multiply that by every single doctor, nurse, tech in the country. And so it was really frustrating to hear on the media, why do they need all this stuff all of a sudden? And for us, it was just, well, we just need it. So we still don't have really what we need. We still just get 1 mask per shift. But when things got really bad, we only had 1 mask for as long as it would last. So that's better. At least at the end of the shift, we can throw it away and not have to figure out where we're going to store it or hang it or whatever. So that was one part. And then the testing at the beginning, it would take like a week for a test to come back, which is just crazy. I mean, to think that I could test someone for chlamydia in 45 minutes and this thing that actually is killing people, I can't test for it, So at least now our testing comes back in 45 minutes, which is awesome. I mean, it's now June and this started in March. So we finally got there. The downside to the testing is that it still only has 70% sensitivity, which what that means in English is if 100 people are in a room, they all have COVID. However we proved they had COVID, only 70 of them would test positive, 30 of them would test negative, even though they have the disease. So that's kind of a problem. So if we really think they have it, we test them 3 times, once a day for 3 days. And if you do a low sensitivity test like that 3 times, and they're all negative, then we can say they're negative. So it's unfortunate. I wish the test was better. Now, if they're positive, it's like 98% specific that you have the disease. But it's a bummer, and it's not gotten any better. I mean, that's how it's been from the very beginning, no matter what tests they're doing, how fast it's happening. So whatever people are hearing, it's still 70%. But morale at work is way better now, because we feel like we have our processes in place. We have the flow of what's going to happen with the patients in place. And so that feels really good. So yeah.
If I may jump in, Dr. Brabec, first of all, kudos. And, you're a warrior and a saint at the same time. I recently had an experience in the ER with COVID symptoms and was tested 5 times, and 5 times came back negative. So maybe you can talk a little bit about those that would test negative that could still have COVID. So I ended up with cardiac effusion and pericarditis.
Yeah.
I had 2.5 liters of fluid removed from my chest.
Wow.
But as you can see, I'm healthy. This is how I normally am. So this was an anomaly in my,
Right.
I'm 58 years old and eat well. I focus on wellness. So maybe for those that are listening out there, you could talk about what precautions we can take to maybe guard against COVID in terms of our immune system. And then the other is the 30% that have it but still test negative. How does that play into the testing, and what can be changed for the test to be more accurate? What's your opinion on that?
As far as the test goes, I mean, I don't know. I mean, the thing is that if you, as a test becomes more sensitive, it becomes less specific. So if it was 100% sensitive, you would say to some people you're COVID positive, but they might really be negative, which in my mind actually would be better than saying you're negative and they're actually positive. HIV is a good example of a test that's not that, the initial test isn't that sensitive, but it's very specific, but it's like that on purpose because you don't want to tell somebody they have hepatitis C or HIV and, oh, just kidding, when we did the confirmatory test. So whereas there's other tests that mono is a good example, it's not that sensitive, but it's very specific. So I don't know. I'm not a science like person of what they could do to the test, but in my mind, I would rather it be oversensitive and a little less specific. Like, okay, I tell you, you had COVID, you didn't really have COVID, no harm, no foul. I mean, you're going to treat the person the same. It's kind of like the flu, in that sense of, if you tell someone they have the flu and they don't really have the flu, it's not a huge deal, you know? As far as health and wellness is concerned, I mean, I think I myself am taking more showers. I take all my clothes off before I come in my house. I go straight to the shower. I wear a mask all the time out in public, everywhere. I just think that's something so simple to do that it makes me angry when I see people without masks on, and when I hear people say, well, you know, I'm not the one that's going to get sick, you know, from COVID, which first of all is baloney. And second, I'm like, right, but what if you're at the grocery store and you have COVID and you give it to this mom who takes it home to her kid who has leukemia and they die? And it's the same mentality of vaccines in my mind. Of my kids are fully vaccinated. Do I think they're going to die of meningitis? No, but the kid down the street that has leukemia might, you know? So, and then I just think exercising is super important. I mean, I've always been an avid exerciser, but since COVID started, I've sort of taken it to like the next extreme level. And I feel really good. So I think endorphins are a powerful drug. Oh yeah. So this photo, I just did this on the 28th. So there's a trail that's 40 miles long that goes along this wild and scenic part of a river near where I live. And I ran it all by myself with all the stuff I needed in my own pack, all alone for 8 hours. And it was something I'd wanted to do for years, and I did it. And it was amazing. So
incredible. That's,
yeah.
People don't know how hard that is. I mean, it's a testament, first of all, you know, being a doctor, taking, you know, the mental focus and brain power to get through medical school, but then to also pull off that feat of endurance. So hats off to you for really setting the example, right?
Yeah, thanks.
Optimal health.
Thanks.
Excellent.
Speak about the signature of COVID in various populations. It shows up one way in children, another way in adults, another way in senior population. Can you talk about what you're seeing in terms of its manifestation in different populations?
Yeah, so I mean, in elderly people, they get really sick. I mean, and I personally think that's just because older people are generally have weaker immune systems, their hearts are weaker, everything, their kidneys are weaker, everything's weaker. Their lungs are weaker. I mean, it tends to go straight to the lungs. I mean, that's the big problem. That's the issue. And so when they get what's called ARDS, which basically your lungs turn to sponges, which is not a good thing, those people tend not to survive. Younger people, kids, seem to not be affected really at all. It's interesting though, because I had said to my husband a few months ago, there's this disease, this inflammatory disease that they're talking about. So Kawasaki's has been around forever. I mean, we all know, I've learned about it. I've seen kids with it, and I wasn't surprised. I was expecting Kawasaki's to come around with kids. And basically it's an inflammation of like their vessels of their body. It can attack the heart, which is, I think I don't know. I haven't seen a kid with it, so I don't know myself, but I think that's probably the thing that ends up killing them. And so I think, and then as far as sort of different ethnical, different ethnic groups. Yeah, I mean, right? It's culling the poor and it's culling minorities, and that's not surprising, you know, because minorities and the poor tend to have worse baseline health. You know, they have more diabetes, they have more lung disease, they they're in food deserts. They live in these concrete jungles where they can't get healthy food. They can't go run 40 miles down a river and get their brains full of endorphins. And so it's so sad, because it's not really their fault, they're just trying to eat. They're trying to find a job, and they're trying to put clothes on their kids' back. And the other problem is those are all the people that are now the essential workers, right? They're the ones that are, putting the food on the grocery counter. They're the ones, filling up, they work at the corner market, at the gas station. They can't go to their mansion in, I don't know, sorry, La Jolla. It just came to mind because
okay.
you guys,
Can I have a mansion?
Or they can't, pay for a private jet and go to the Bahamas and just hole up for 5 months, And so I think it's a function of baseline health is worse. I think it's a function of just exposure risk in general. I mean, the more times you sort of run through gunfire, the higher the chances are something's gonna happen. And it's a function of they don't have enough time and energy to do all the healthy things that we were just talking about. So
you're talking about a two-class healthcare system. You're talking about the role of class and those who are impacted by coronavirus. If you have the economy to take care of yourself and have access to good healthcare, you're more likely to survive and or not get it. And if you don't have the economy to do that, you're much more vulnerable.
Yeah, I mean, it's both of those things, right? So it's that population is more likely to get it because, like I said, they're higher risk of exposure. And then if they do get it, because of their the socioeconomic status in general, this is a generalization, right? I mean, of course, there's poor Caucasian people and, but right. In general, and then once they do get it, their baseline health is worse. And they also, lower socioeconomic people tend to live in places where those are the hospitals that are going to get overrun. Look at New York. Mm-hmm. And so now you have all these sick people rushing to the same hospital and the system gets totally overwhelmed, So it's like a three-prong, it's like three strikes. It's so sad and scary, and I mean, I'm scared for, my own healthcare workers too, of our risk. I mean, I feel like all the other things, we're healthy, I have good food, all those things, but, we have a higher exposure risk in trying to mitigate my staff from exposing themselves as little as possible is a big stress for me, Yeah.
That's one thing I wanted to talk about, because I have a dear friend and they're on the front lines too. And I know every day you are taking on that risk to help others, and you're also a mom. So you're trying to take care of, like you said, your staff, but then you're also faced with that decision of, well, what do you do with your family? And my friend who's a nurse, she's like, okay, well, I might have to self-quarantine, but my kids are homeschooling. And so, you were faced with that question. And fortunately, your three boys went with Dave, your husband, mm-hmm. to Montana, mm-hmm. right? So they had this experience. But what was that decision like? How was it? Was it an easy one? And I know you said they were gone for 7 weeks.
7 weeks. It wasn't really, I don't think Dave and I ever sort of sat down and talked about it. It was more that he could tell that I was stressed, because it's obvious when I get stressed. Not at work. I have a very good, shield at work. But when I'm at home and I'm stressed, my husband can tell. We've been now together for a very long time. And so I think he just knew that if he took himself and the boys out of the situation, and that was one less piece of a puzzle that I had to feel like I had to, what's the word? I had to be worried about.
Or responsible.
Responsible, that's the word. Then it was better, you know? So, and we do talk about still, you know, if and when the next wave comes, like I wouldn't be surprised if they leave again, you know, because it's just, you know, I'm like a human that has like radiation coming off of them, you know? And so it's like the less people you can have exposed to like this radiation or this irradiated bomb thing, the better, you know? So I think that if when the next wave comes, like, I think that we'll probably do that again.
How do you manage the stress as a culture? How are doctors? Because I know, first of all, your institution, your hospital, serves over 600,000 people within the area of impact that you serve, which is colossal. So the engagement of the doctors and the way you guys have always been as a culture, I would think, as a result of having to serve in this time of emergency, would have to change the interaction between the two of you guys. How has the culture within the hospital changed, and the dialogue between the doctors and the care between you guys? How is that unfolding?
I think it's gotten way better, actually.
What did it used to be like before versus what it is now?
So, you know, before ER doctors are sort of, I always viewed ourselves as kind of lower rung doctors in the hierarchy. You know, there's fancy neurosurgeons and fancy plastic surgeons and, you know, fancy ophthalmologists and, you know, these doctors that are like highly compensated, super talented. You know, those are the ones you see on TV, right? And so, and then there was sort of the ER doctors that take care of the poorest of the poor and, you know, the people that have nothing and they're only in our ER because the system somehow failed them. And now, and we would get a lot of pushback sometimes from our consultants of, you know, do I really have to come see that person? Or do you really, you know, that kind of camaraderie, not all the time. And, you know, I've been doing this long enough that I can say, you know, pull the mom card a little bit and be like, no, you really have to. And now, I think suddenly all of those consultants realize that we actually know how to do a lot of things. You know, we ER doctors are actually pretty rad, you know, and when you're in an airplane and they say, we need a doctor, they're actually saying we need an ER doctor or a cardiologist.
Interesting.
And so, I've had so many of my colleagues come up to me that I, you know, just say, thank you so much. Or just the other night, a radiologist called me on the phone out of the blue and was just like, hey, Jenny, I just wanted to say thank you so much for being in the ER and taking care of our patients. And I was just like, I mean, never. And so I think that's cool.
Yeah. Well, Tony, I know Tony, like he's been a blessing for me this past year or so and really helped me with my personal growth and something called mindfulness. And is there any training that goes on, or do you think, are you seeing, like, you know, since COVID, is there more emphasis for the staff to have mindfulness training or anything?
So not for me in my hospital. I never had empathy training in medical school ever, which is insane. Or in residency for that matter.
Why is that insane? Why is it insane to not have empathy training as a doctor?
Because that's like one of our biggest jobs is to be empathetic. I mean, as time goes on for me, the medicine becomes easier, not easier, but more, it's just second nature, you know? So my bandwidth for the human part of medicine, which quite frankly is the biggest part, there's space for it now. And I never got training. I'm learning on the job. I mean, here's a perfect example. I never really learned like how you go and tell a family that their family member died.
Right.
Like I had to kind of it's sort of molded and changed as the years have gone by. And, or I never remember learning, how do you go tell someone that they have cancer? I mean, so I just think it's a big, and I think that's why suicide rate is so high in physicians, is because they probably in some level don't feel very prepared, for the human part of medicine, not the book part of medicine. Because in medical school and residency, it's focused on the book part of medicine, so you can do it because it's a lot. But in reality, after 10 years of doing it, the book part becomes, you're very facile. You've read the same book over and over and over again, it from front to back to front. And so now you're sort of left of, oh God, So I'm so happy to hear that they're doing that at the San Diego Medical School, because
UC San Diego, they're really pioneering that whole idea, to bring empathy and compassion to the medical school. And that's what I think with Denny Sanford and the Sanford School of, he's touched so many lives, but I don't want to get it wrong, but Denny Sanford and with compassion and empathy. I don't know the exact title, but Dr. Brenner, I know we need to do a little, this is part of the virtual social club, is right. we curate bromances, and we curate all sorts of friendships and ways that we can collaborate, and really leverage, we call it our collective genius. So it would be a pleasure to, introduce you to Dr. Brenner and the people behind that, Dr. Mobley, that really are making that happen.
Because it would be really interesting to, get that training after you're done with residency, because learning doesn't stop the moment you finish residency. You actually probably can learn more because you have all the limbs on the tree. And so it's kind of unfortunate that, maybe if I lived closer to a medical school, I could go sit in on a lecture or something, or I'll just come visit you, Amanda, and
I just tagged David, so. Technology.
Yeah, and so it would be, I wish that, maybe I'll try to look up a CME course that's about empathy in medicine. That would be really interesting, because I've only ever gone to courses where it just kind of teaches you new stuff, and maybe it would be better to go and, strengthen the heart part.
My mom was a physician assistant in England and practiced in England, and she was also worked in the ER for some time. And I lived in Madrid with my mom, and I remember what it was. Looking back now and thinking, boy, how do kids live with parents who aren't doctors and nurses? And so when we speak of empathy, how do you explain what's going on, and how do you help? What kind of conversations do you have with children about what's actually happened? I won't even talk about the violence that's happening, but how do you contextualize this for little minds who certainly will have to navigate this in their own way, and maybe feeling things that they can't give verbiage to? What do you say to your 3 boys?
Well, my boys are older, so my kids are 15, almost 13, and 8. So, but it's interesting you ask that question, because when they were in Montana and I was at home, they watched the nightly news every night, and every night the news very much, not sensational. I guess it was sensationalized of, the war with COVID, healthcare workers are going to war. And Oliver would call me, who's my 8-year-old, and he would be like, "Mommy, you're not going to die in this war, are you?" And I'm just like, oh my God. Yeah. And so I told Dave, I said, you either need to talk to him and explain to him every day that I'm safe, or you need to just not watch the news, because that's sort of like having your 8-year-old watch the news every night about the war in Iraq and their family members in Iraq, and they have no idea that actually they're totally fine. And so, but it never even dawned on me, because I was like, my kids are older, they can understand, but 8-year-olds are still, they're not that old, So I've been, go ahead.
No, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, so I've been, I think it's actually been easier for Oliver to be home, because he can see me and see that I'm safe and see that everything's okay, as opposed to just being told. I mean, he wanted to talk to me on the phone every single day.
My goodness.
And my other two kids,
She's fine.
yeah. So.
Well, Amanda, I know you have an 11-year-old. I mean, what is your
right?
Well,
I agree, because again, they have a lot more access to social media, and Leo, fortunately or unfortunately, got a phone a few months ago, and unexpectedly, and he's on TikTok, and he tells me, like, I saw this on TikTok, right? That, like, wow. They have access. They have access without context. And that's what's scary. And we're parents that are working right now. And so how do we approach the subject with our children, and how do we get to them first to provide that context before they've seen, it's that saying, like, some things you can't unsee, right? Mm-hmm. And so for us, for COVID, he's been very frustrated. He says boomers. Maybe, can I use it, the term here, right? Because grandma and grandpa, he loves calling them boomers, right? This is slang. But he's very angry when he goes out and he sees people that don't have masks. And we had to simplify it as, like, this is a call to action to be selfless. Right. And some people are going to have the ability to be selfless, and some just won't. But the other thing, in addition to COVID, like, how do we speak to our children about COVID? And then also, how do we speak to our children, bringing it to this week? Jenny, you and I grew up on a very diverse island. We went to St. Joe's together. A unique experience. Both our fathers coached baseball together, and the kids on the team were from everywhere in the East Bay, right? So we just had a different upbringing, and talking to the kids not only about health, but also about racial tension and white privilege. Like, there's all these conversations that we're realizing we have to have with our children. So it comes back to, yes, access and what's on the news. And I personally haven't owned a television for 16 years now. When people walk into my home, they kind of look for the TV, and I'm like, no TV. But that doesn't mean it's not being accessed through other forms of media, and now that's social media. So it's that was a long-winded answer, but I think it's a huge concern, and parents just have to sit down and have these tough talks with their children, right? In our youth, it might have been, the discussion was say no to drugs. Right. And now it's, let's talk about viruses that, are global, and let's talk about, racial tension and injustice and white privilege. So it's much more intense conversations, I think, that we're forced to have with our kids.
At a younger age.
Yes.
I mean, I was trying to think, what was I doing when I was 8? Telling you, I wasn't thinking about police violence against African-American males. I mean, it just wasn't, I don't know what I was doing. Anyways, nothing important probably.
We were riding our bikes.
Yeah, we were riding our bikes and, building sandcastles or, so anyway.
And how do you raise 3 boys in a time of this? We don't only have the existential threat of the coronavirus, but we do have the reality also of this violence against men of color. How do you raise 3 boys with a moral compass in respect to this moment in time and how this informs them?
Yeah, that's a really, I struggle with that every day because I live in Southern Oregon, which is a very white place. Yeah. I live in Ashland, Oregon, which is like a upper socioeconomic bubble within this white bubble of Southern Oregon. We travel a lot. We take them to places. This summer before COVID, I was supposed to take them on my medical trip to Ecuador so that they could experience and realize how lucky they are. I have, that's from my trip last summer. I have a husband who grew up in Ann Arbor, Michigan, which is a really diverse place. He taught in jail. When we lived in Albuquerque, he taught in a school that he taught D-level special ed, which was all the kids that got kicked out of regular mainstream education for behavior, and he had them all in one class together. We called it like the stepping stone to juvenile hall. I mean, it was sort of, and so I'm so lucky that he's the one raising my boys. I mean, obviously I'm helping, but you know, he's been home with them for 13 years, 100% of the time. And I think that really helps because he makes them sit down and like watch different. Oh yeah, so that's Dave. Sam has the blonde hair. Oliver's the redhead. Gabe is the tall one with the red or blue jacket. That's in Rome, actually, Amanda. Yeah, that's the St. Peter's Basilica in the background above Sam's head, if you could see it. So anyway, so we struggle with that. I mean, we talk about that a lot of how do you raise 3 boys that were born with Willy Wonka's golden ticket, but make them realize that they were born with Willy Wonka's golden ticket, you know, like,
love you, Jenny. I love you for saying that.
And I don't know, you know, we're working on it. You know, we take them to experience things. We make them read different books. I tell them all the time they were born with Willy Wonka's golden ticket. And I just cross my fingers and hope that I will eventually raise 3 men that respect all people, respect women, and respect themselves. And we'll see. I'll let you know.
I mean, yeah, Tony, like you yourself, you know, how is it? You have 3 boys, and you know, Maria, if you see Maria, Tony's wife, like you could say a mixed couple or a biracial couple. And I'm sure you grew up in San Diego, and what's that been like for you this week and raising kids, and is there a difference or do your sons feel like they identify with a certain culture or?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting, you know, because I was born in Oakland and given up for adoption.
That's why you're cool. Sorry.
We had the same roots. But it's interesting because, you know, as I grew up, my lens was clear or maybe colorblind, right? I didn't recognize color because I didn't know what race to identify with because I didn't know where I came from. So it was a big question mark. But then as I got older, you know, the curly hair, the darker skin, you know, all the different features kicked in where I became very curious. And then as I got older and started to have a family of my own, Maria's from Massachusetts. I'm Irish Catholic, and, you know, we were drawn to each other because of our vision, where we wanted to go as a family. So when we began having kids, everyone, oh, you're going to have beautiful kids, you know, and I'm like, but, you know, there's no textbook for raising kids. And like, how do you instill in them the values? And now my kids are adults. And I'm grateful that we didn't have the social media thing when they were little, because that has added so much more layering to parenting today. I mean, my kids are adults now and they have their own phone, and obviously, but we were able to imprint their DNA before social media with some discernment and some decision making with a moral compass that we thought was true and right. And I think that is like what's missing today is like some parents are robbed from that right because of social media.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so somehow, some way, we will figure out how to get through this. But I think the answer for me, as being, you know, a 58-year-old person of color, many colors, married to a white woman, I think we have to understand that our DNA is only, our skin color is only 1% of our DNA, right? Mm-hmm. So that's like me judging Alexis based on the color of the shirt that he has on today.
I hope you like it. I hope you like it.
I like purple, by the way, lavender, whatever you want to call it. So I really feel like we have to kind of go back to, you know, inclusion, diversity and inclusion, which is the big topic here on campus. We have to go back to what we have in common and stop focusing on all the negative external stuff and look at the internal shell. And how do we become better examples by our way of being than what we do or where we came from. And so I think that's why I love Bella Vista Cafe, because it is that hub of non-judgment. It is that hub of acceptance and bringing people together out of love. And that's what makes the world go around, right, Amanda?
Yeah, it does.
I just wanted to say something to
Yeah.
it. My grandfather is Scottish, tall white man with a bald head. Thank you, grandfather. And I grew up in my mom's, as I said, my mom was a physician's assistant in England, got a PhD in health science and that sort of thing. But I grew up in a family where, if you saw the family photo, it's from white to black and everything in between. My mom is a little bit about your color. And as I listen to you speak, we talk about mindfulness. I want to come back to that, or empathy. And the whole idea of being a person of color and have to be mindful about how we raise our children, because they go into a world that doesn't always afford them the same luxury as is afforded Jennifer's kids, Jenny's kids. And so that consciousness brings about certainly an empathy, but also a self-awareness of what your value system is. What is my value system as I travel through the world? And it seems that Amanda, that graduating class that year, for whatever reason, got a heavy dose of empathy, got a heavy dose of inclusion. And I just want to take my hat off to the men, women, children of that community in that time, who raised a generation of your friends, your peeps, who have met this week, that all seems to be cut from the same cloth. And it didn't seem like it was intentional as much as that was the DNA of the culture at that time. And my question is, when you see that, it's there. When it's not there, it's there. And so how do we hold each other and recreate that with each other? Because I really feel that's what's needed now, not in a Pollyanna kind of way, but in the way that you guys seem to have been raised at that particular point in time, with your teachers, your parents, the organic diversity of the school. Mm-hmm. And that just seemed to have been something that's in the DNA of every single one of your friends you've had on the air this week. And, I don't want to keep talking, but that's rather incredible.
It's very true. And I think, Jenny, what yesterday was a segment where we were just talking about my youth, and it's been great because my dad's been able to join and my family's here in town for this week. And I think Alexis posed that question, well, like, what do you miss about Alameda? And I was like, well, I think when you leave Alameda, and to your point about going up to Ashland and then going, I came to La Jolla, and when I love UC San Diego, but when I first came to UC San Diego, I was like, yo, like, where my peeps? Where, like, I got to go down to Mexico to get my fill of diversity, because this was 20 something years ago. And it's that how do we, so what I missed was community. And I think I was searching for years and years to find my own Alameda and outside of Alameda. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? And mm-hmm. and it wasn't that there aren't other Alamedas that exist out there. There wasn't this sense of community that had, like you're saying, empathy, inclusion, diversity, and this sense of all the generations like mm-hmm. kicked it. Like every family had 3 or 4 kids, and we'd go to a party and everyone's at the party. And it's like the Halls are here, the Gersons are here, the Schulers are here, the Contreras, everyone looked out for each other. Mm-hmm. And so as we became parents of young men, that's what we're trying to figure out. How do we instill that, mm-hmm. in our children to have them have that same sense of openness? And like you said, be aware. And I love how you put it, like, our kids have the Willy Wonka golden ticket. I can't wait to go upstairs after this and talk to my son. And I think a lot of parents, and white women, right, are going to be appreciative of that example, right? Because how do we present it to our kids? So
Yeah,
I totally, it resonates, you know,
and
how
honestly,
do we raise our kids to be open and loving of all people?
but to your point, Alexis, like it's unfortunate though, right, that we still live in a country in 2020 where the color of somebody's skin gives them a leg up. Like it shouldn't be like that. You know what I mean? That's actually the part that I find super frustrating, you know, because it shouldn't be, you know, everybody should just be judged on their own merit, not on the lavender shirt that they're wearing, you know? And so, that's the part that I find really frustrating about the whole thing is that, yeah, you know, I have these children that I have to raise with empathy, but at the same time, I'm frustrated that, oh, I have to move out of this room. I'm going to walk. That they have this extra power is the wrong word, extra privilege that they didn't really earn, you know? So that's the part that's frustrating. So anyway.
Wow.
I think these kinds of conversations are how you begin to bring the awareness, and I'll use Tony's word, the mindfulness and the empathy. I think to be a person is to be empathic. For me to sit within my personhood, I have to think and I have to reflect, and so it demands that I have empathy for other people. If I sit in my color, if I sit in my whiteness and the privilege that engenders, not because I earned it, because it's given to me, I don't know if I can have empathy if I sit in the right privilege of what society has offered me that I haven't earned.
And it's funny because it goes back to you know, my job as an ER doctor. I have a lot of people say to me a lot, you know, how do you have empathy for people that, you know, for example, terrible drug addicts, you know, I've never been a drug addict. You know, I've had friends that have been, but I myself, that's not been an issue, thank goodness, you know, for me. And that goes back to empathy of, you know, if we had to walk in every set of shoes in order to like love and care for somebody, can you imagine how exhausting that would be? You know, it's like, well, you know, they're people too. And, you know, I'm there to take care of them, not to chastise them. You know, that's not, they know how bad they have it. Believe me, I've talked for hours with, you know, people that are super down and out, you know, and I don't need to bring that to their mind. They know it way better than I do. And so it goes back to empathy of what you were saying of, you know, you can't live everything your own self. You have to just take some people's word for it, you know? So anyway.
Well, and you know, I'm going to say this to you and Amanda, and I'm going to go back to all the people Amanda have introduced us to, and Tony, you're included in this, is that you were raised in a time where the values of community and inclusion happened. And what I say is empathy is a verb, empathy is a behavior, empathy is portable. And Amanda has taken everything she's gotten from, I'm blanking on where you're from. It just left
Alameda.
Amanda's taken everything she's gotten from Alameda and created Bella Vista. And so the values of Alameda seems to be able to live as different people who've come from that community take it and bring it into being a doctor, being a restaurateur. And I think that's what we need. I think we need to pollinate our society with little seeds of empathy and the behavior of empathy rooted in the value system. Empathy is, you know, it's not this amorphous thing. It's rooted in the value system of love and inclusion and empathy and an understanding that I'm part of the ecosystem, part of the family of humankind. And so when I think of Bella Vista, I have such a greater understanding of Amanda now than I have ever had. And there's, Tony, I don't know about you, but I want to get in a time capsule and go back to Alameda at that point in time and just see what was going on there. that
Oh boy.
maybe I don't want to see all
I
of
don't
it.
know if you do.
Maybe I don't want to Tony, maybe we don't want to see all of it, but
You
some
got to have somebody watch your back.
But I actually think that that's the silver lining of this
Yeah.
COVID-19 situation for the past 3 months is I really think it has made people realize that they need their community
Yes.
like really bad. You know, they need everybody to stay in their houses. They need to listen to the rules of don't go to the grocery store between 6 and 8 a.m. because that's when people over 65 are there. I actually feel like community where I am is stronger now than it's ever been because people realize that they need everybody else around them to do what they're supposed to do to keep themselves safe. And you can't just get on a jet airplane and go on a vacation and forget about your community. You know, you've sort of been unquote stuck in your community and had to really like strengthen those relationships. And so maybe if nothing else from COVID-19, maybe that for me is a good thing, you know, of really, I mean, I have great neighbors and we have a really strong neighborhood and our kids all play together. And, but for other people, you know, I think it's really actually probably been cool that they've been forced to kind of stay at home and be like, hi neighbor, you know, across the fence. And, you know, like I had a quarantine birthday. I know Leo had a quarantine birthday and having people like really go out of their way to like just leave a little flower on your porch because they know it's your birthday, but they can't see you. And so I'm hoping that after all of this, that at least we'll be left with that.
I think so.
Yeah.
Oh, well,
Good.
thank you, Jenny, for your time. I know
Yeah.
we could talk for hours. We used to spend hours together studying Spanish, right? Vocabulary, or watching Candyman. And don't watch Candyman. That's such a scary movie.
But I'll come to San Diego soon and I'll meet you guys in person. It'll be great.
You will.
Yeah.
And I think what's
Definitely.
been cool is the silver lining is connecting with the community, you know, your local community, but also connecting with your roots, right? And we're blessed because we are in quarantine where we have technology that allows us to reconnect. And this week has been fascinating to just learn about where everyone we grew up with, where they are, because you see them on social media, but when you start to reconnect and talk to them, it's like, oh my gosh, just the things that we've accomplished. But it's not only what we've accomplished, the people that we've become and the lives that we have impacted in such a positive way. I think just I am so proud of where I come from and the friends I grew up with and what we're doing to make the world a better place. And I think just from the few segments we've had so far, there's already we're jumping off calls and collaborations are starting.
Yeah.
Right. In so many ways. So get ready. We're going to bring you here. We're going to connect you with UC San Diego. Thank you, gentlemen, for jumping on. I love you all very much.
Thank you.
Tomorrow.
They're heroes to the world. So thank you for all that
thank
you
you for
do.
what you do.
Thank you. And tomorrow, I'm supposed to say, please like us, subscribe, BellaV TV on YouTube. But also tomorrow, we are going to have 3 segments. We had to shift the schedule a little bit. So in the morning, Lindsay Fonseca will be coming on. She's the Hollywood actress and someone that I knew since she was in Pigtails and in my dance class. And director Marielle Heller, who was our neighbor, she'll be coming on as well. Her latest film was with Tom Hanks. And then in the evening, Galen Whittemore, who is a very dynamic gentleman who I just found out, like one of the fun facts is he's working with Too Short from Oakland. So he's in the music industry and we'll be talking about what that means to build your brand and also just more of what it's like during COVID and all this civil unrest. So huge day tomorrow. It's been a great week. Hella proud where I'm from. And we'll see you guys tomorrow. I love you, Jenny. I love you guys.
I love you guys.
All right.
Bye.
Ciao.
Ciao.